Today I'm using Bronny and I'm playing his entire collegiate career and not stopping until he's drafted into the NBA. He's currently rated as about a top 30 prospect, and whichever college ends up getting him to commit will be making an amazing decision. For a freshman, he's pretty good with stats like 91 passing, and even though he hasn't played a second of college ball yet, Bronny brings more value to a school than any other player based on his name, so these three colleges are going to try their hardest to land him. Now the problem is Bronny has to complete all 6 of these challenges to get drafted into the NBA, and the longer he takes to complete all 6 of them, the less chance there is he ever gets to play with his dad. He also still needs to make a decision on where he wants to attend college, and Oregon, USC, and Ohio State all pushed their hardest for him, but in the end, after enjoying his Ohio State visit with his dad the most, he decided he wanted to commit to the Buckeyes, which meant he was the 6th man going into his freshman year. His first game was against rival Cincinnati, and he was on the bench while freshman guard and 4-star recruit Tyson Chapman started over him. Both he and Bronny were overperforming at practice so far, so they'd be splitting minutes to start the year, competing back and forth for the starting shooting guard spot. Remember, Bronny's first of 6 challenges is to win that role, and all the other stuff could fall into place after that, because even though Bryce Sensabaugh declared for the NBA draft, he decided to come back on a massive NIL deal after Bronny announced his commitment to Ohio State. That would be big for the team, and even though Bronny hadn't gotten a basket of his own yet, he was dropping dimes, and to end the first half, he found point guard Bruce Thornton for a wide open 3-pointer. Obviously, he was still splitting playing time, but with Tyson Chapman panicking and committing costly turnovers for the Buckeyes, he wasn't out there for long, and Bronny James was going to have his chance to shine. I thought maybe the pressure was getting to him because he still hadn't been able to score, but then he pulled off something I thought only his dad could do in his prime. He would also assist the forward transfer from Minnesota, Jamison Battle, along with finishing a tough layup with 2 dudes all over him, so it was clear that he was going to be a better fit for the starting spot. With 2 minutes remaining, the game was all tied up at 32 apiece until Bryce Sensabaugh forced his way into the lane for a tough 2, and when he was needed in the clutch, he stepped up big time. Then Bronny helped force the turnover that would pretty much seal the game for the Buckeyes, and he made sure he didn't miss his free throws either, so Ohio State started the year 1-0. Bronny had officially earned the starting spot, getting him one step closer to playing in the NBA with his dad, and throughout the first few months of the year, Ohio State would go 15-4, making them a top 5 team, and now it was time for the rivalry matchup. Bronny James had clearly just continued to improve, and he was one of the focal points of the offense now, as he always found the open shooter. Beating Michigan was incredibly important, especially since the football team had dropped the last 2, and apparently Hunter Dickinson decided he wanted to stay a Wolverine. The first few minutes of the game were very scrappy, but Michigan made the mistake of leaving Bronny open in the corner, and don't get me wrong, he still had freshman moments where it looked like he was lost, so he wasn't perfect, but he was doing a great job most of the time. He came into college mainly as a passer, but he was starting to score with ease, and after Michigan went on an 8-0 run, this slam from Jamison Battle was much needed. He had been having an incredible year for the Buckeyes as he drilled this one from the state logo, and although this is a Bronny career playthrough, I can't ignore how well he was shooting. With under 3 minutes left, it was clear that this game was going to have a tight finish, and that's because Doug McDaniel was automatic in the final few minutes. He scored 7 in a row for the Wolverines, but Bronny came up clutch as he drilled this wide open 3 to put the Buckeyes back up 1. Ohio State's home arena was shaking, and that caused Michigan to miss the go-ahead shot, and then Jamison Battle said goodnight off of Bronny's last-second assist. Michigan would lose the rivalry matchup, and that knocks off the second of 6 challenges in this video. Ohio State would continue to win after that, and surprisingly the Big Ten race was the Buckeyes versus Rutgers. Beating the Scarlet Knights would pretty much guarantee a top 3 finish in the conference, and with a 17-point win, things were looking good. After ending the year 3-1, the Buckeyes were officially Big Ten champions, and Bronny was halfway to making the NBA. The season was going way better than expected as we made the conference championship, and it was going to be a great game. Bronny definitely took after his father as he made sure to exaggerate contact on every play, but it worked for easy points, so I can't blame him. He got Ohio State their first 5 of the Big Ten championship, and then he dished out an assist to Bryce Sensabaugh for the following bucket. Indiana was off to an atrocious start as they couldn't buy a basket, and Bronny kept pulling off moves that he clearly learned from LeBron. This game was going to end up being for a 1 seed in the tournament, and I'm not sure how Indiana was expected to keep up with this high-scoring offense. Everybody was doing their part in draining each shot that they put up, and this rejection from sophomore Felix Okaparo was jaw-dropping. By halftime, it was 27-14, but Indiana came out in the second with a little bit more fire, so Bryce Sensabaugh responded by doing the exact same thing, and Bronny James would throw one down later on that erupted the crowd. This was his best performance all year as he drained another three, and this was the game where he really started to stand out. Ohio State won the Big Ten Conference Tournament, and Bronny won Player of the Game as well, which meant he was 2 challenges away from making the NBA. The Buckeyes ended up being a 1 seed, and the path to the Elite Eight was pretty realistic, but they would have to avoid pulling a Virginia or a Purdue against 16 seed Grambling State. Their opponent was stroking it extremely well from the jump, and midway through the first half, Ohio State was still down by 6. Bronny was giving it his all, but his team was struggling to overcome the deficit, and with 2 guys in their face, Grambling State had shooters knocking everything down. They were not playing like a normal 16 seed, and at halftime they were shooting 23% better, but that was not sustainable, and Ohio State was ready to bounce back. Bronny contributed to that as he created enough separation to tie it up at 25, and he glided across the lane to give his Buckeyes their first lead. Once his team started to hit shots, Grambling State began to crumble, and there was no reason to slow down the number of threes that were being jacked up. On the other hand, the Tigers just couldn't buy a basket in the final minutes, and Bronny would seal the deal with this amazing mid-range jumper. His team survived getting upset in the first round, and one of the schools he almost committed to was up next. They beat VCU to get to this game, and it was time to see if Bronny made the right college choice. He was already giving up 3-pointers to former 5-star Isaiah Collier, but he would respond with one of his own in his eye, and he came into this game ready to dominate as he forced the and one play here. Bronny was putting on a clinic as his fundamental knowledge of the game stood out, and it's safe to say that if anybody owned the first half, it was him. He tried to get his teammates involved, but none of them were shooting very well so far, so going into the half, USC was actually going to have a 3-point lead, and the Trojans defense was just making it really hard to get buckets. Careless turnovers could end up costing Ohio State this one as USC came out in the second half on a run, but when the Buckeyes needed points the most, somehow Zed Key managed to put this one back in with one hand. Then Bronny would make the perfect pass to him underneath, which would get them back within just 4, and Bryce Sensabaugh sure didn't return to college just to go out in the round of 32. I don't know who was matched up with him, but he could not guard him, and momentum swung back in the direction of the Buckeyes, and Bronny made sure it kept going. With a minute and a half left, he kept Ohio State up by 1, and 9th-year senior Boogie Ellis would try to respond back, but it would rim out, and then Bronny lowered his head and ferociously took it straight to the rim. As time was expiring, USC got a wide open look that would send it to overtime, but it was a bit off, and Ohio State was on to the Sweet 16. At this point, it's safe to say Bronny averaged over 10 in one stat, so that means there's only one obstacle between him and the NBA, and it'll all come down to if he wins this game or not. Xavier knocked out my Wildcats in the last round, so they were the final team standing between Bronny and the Elite Eight. From the jump, the Buckeyes offense was humming as they kept knocking down shots, and Xavier wasn't able to do very much on their defense. The Musketeers also got yammed on by Bronny, so they were not having a good start, but with a few threes, they were able to get right back in it, and if Ohio State wanted to pull away before halftime, they needed to go on another run, which point guard Bruce Thompson was greatly contributing to. At the break, Ohio State had a 7-point lead, but within just a few minutes, the Musketeers erased it plus more, so fortunately, Bronny continued to drop a lot of dimes, and with this one, he was already in double digits for assists on the day. In fact, this bucket would only be his 7th point so far, and his big impact would come from what he did best, threading the needle with his passes, which was enough to get Ohio State to the Elite Eight. Once again, Bronny won Player of the Game, and he also completed everything he needed to do to declare for the NBA draft, but before he found out which team he would be on with his dad, he could play in up to 3 more college games, and at this point, a national championship was a real possibility, but his Buckeyes would have to get past 2-seeded Creighton first. It was a tight game with a few minutes remaining in the first half, but the Blue Jays would end it on a run as they took a 6-point lead, and the scary thing was they weren't shooting better. Bronny wanted the ball a lot more so he could try and make a difference, but Creighton was all over him when he got it, and they came out stroking it from deep without any issues. All of a sudden, the Blue Jays had taken an 11-point lead, and Ohio State was on the brink of being eliminated from the tourney. However, Bronny didn't want to go out yet as he dished out some great passes, and even though he would miss this wide open three, Jamison Battle was in the right position to finish the job. With 2.5 minutes remaining, this shot would actually bring it back within 2, but then everything just seemed to go the wrong way for the Buckeyes. Despite almost losing the ball and missing this jumper, Creighton somehow got points here, and their defense on the other end was nothing short of remarkable. They were fired up as this slam put them back up by 6, and Bronny would miss another open three-pointer, which stung a lot because the Blue Jays were scoring baskets like every 10 seconds now. No matter who was open, nobody on Ohio State could hit a shot when it mattered, and the Final Four dreams were going to remain as just dreams. Bronny was not happy with this result, especially since he had a good performance himself, but it just wasn't enough in the end. Creighton would go on to win it all, and Bronny's 17-point tournament average ended up raising his draft stock, so the Lakers were out of the running, and after Cleveland made some trades, not only would they draft Bronny, but they'd also bring LeBron home for a third time.